So yeah, welcome everybody, and I'd like to welcome you to our 11th webinar of the program on exclusion, inequality, and late working life EIWO, and it's our 11th webinar in this series. So we're quite in a process, and I'd like to welcome in particular Arianna Poli on the one side and Matt Flynn. And hi, Matt. Happy to see you here. I was hoping that you arrive. Just saw you coming in. And we will just have a short presentation at the beginning by Arianna. Arianna is a postdoctoral researcher here at the Division Aging and Social Change at Linköping University, working on issues of work and digitalization. And then we have Matt Flynn. Matt is where are you? There you are. You are a professor at the University of Holland, director of the Center of Research into the Older Workforce, if I quote this correctly. And I'm happy to have you here to give another input following Arianna, also having the chance to react on her and also initiating a debate with the audience. And everybody is invited, of course, to join us for this discussion. I think we have input for about, I guess, half an hour of the two of you, and then we have a discussion. But we can be flexible, and nobody tells us when we have to stop. So there's time left for everything. And I simply hand over Arianna, and Matt, you will just add to this whenever there's time for it. And yeah, Arianna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar today. It's a pleasure to be here and present a work that we recently published. Now I will just try to share my screen. Yeah, so as I said, today I'm going to present a paper that we recently published. And this paper focused on the technology-related changes happening at work during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we were especially interested in understanding the older workers' experience with these technology-related changes. This is a work that I conducted together with Annika Ewer and Andreas, so it of course it's part of a study that we conducted here at Linköping University, but I will tell you more in few slides. So I will start with a brief introduction and background to the topic. So as you all know, workplaces are undergoing significant digital transformations, and these digital transformations are really affecting profoundly how, where, and when we work. In particular, digitalization and more recently the rise of artificial intelligence provide both challenges and opportunities, particularly for older workers, their satisfaction and their work participation. Of course, the workforce is aging, and older workers represent an increasing share of the workforce. And at the same time, older workers are less likely to be equipped with the capacities needed to adapt to these digital changes and digital transformations compared to other age groups in the workforce. So all these points and elements make the intersection of aging, working life, and digitalization a particularly interesting and relevant area of study. And by this we can really contribute on the condition. I mean, on understanding the conditions for a more inclusive working life. So with this background in mind, we focused on what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, work environments were profoundly reshaped, And one of the major change that was happening, it was a rapid increase in the adoption of digital technologies at work. And I think most of us experienced this. And the technology-related changes during the COVID-19 pandemic period involved an increased use of digital tools for different type of activities, mostly related to communication, administration, collaboration activities. But we also faced changes in work arrangements. So many workers were working from home or having like hybrid working arrangements. There has also been new modes of training and new routines emerged. And as I said, many of these changes involved technology-related changes and adjustments. And of course, while some of these digital technological shifts were already happening in certain workplaces and among certain groups, the pandemic accelerated these transformations and the adoption of digital tools at work. And of course, some workers were, some groups of workers were found with little or no preparation for adapting to these changes. So then, while the use of digital technologies at work is associated with a range of positive outcomes, and this is something that we know from the literature, we also know that not all workers are equally equipped to benefit from these opportunities, as I have already mentioned. And this disparity mostly relate to inequalities in digital access, digital use, digital competence, but also digital trust, availability of support, and particularly all these aspects affecting older workers who are a group in which are more often less equipped for in terms of digital resources. We know that digital inequalities are typically shaped by factors such as age, gender, education, and occupation, job level. So they typically follow a social gradient. So it's likely that different groups of older workers experienced all these digital transformations happening during the pandemic in a very different way, depending on their individual circumstances. So based on these reflections, in this study, we aimed at understanding older workers' subjective evaluation of the experience with technology-related changes at work during the COVID-19 pandemic and its association with socioeconomic and contextual factors in Sweden. We used two guiding research questions for this investigation, and the first one asked about the changes, what changes in use of digital technology at work did older workers experience during that specific period? And the second question focused on the satisfaction with these changes. So we wanted to understand how the satisfaction with technology-related changes vary across different groups of older workers. This investigation was conducted within the Ask COVID-19 study. This study focused on investigating the social consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic in working life. We conducted an online survey covering the adult population in the Östergötland region in Sweden. For those of you who are not from Sweden, you can see the darker area in the map. So this region is the south of Sweden. The sampling was done through an online advertisement in a local newspaper in the region of Östergötland. And this was how the online advertisement looked like. We conducted 4 waves starting from June 2020, and then we conducted new waves in December 2020, June 2021, and December 2021. The sampling was unstratified and resulted in a sample of almost 3,000 cases. The average age was 53 years. We had most women, 65% were women and 35% men. The majority of the sample was indicated to have upper secondary education. For this specific paper that I'm presenting today, we focused on three out of 4 waves. We pulled the data from 3 waves and used a cross-sectional design. This was done mostly because we were mostly interested in the distribution of satisfaction. So of the outcome and not much how the outcome was changing through the time. The sample for this study was including individuals 50 plus who indicated to be either self-employed or employed at the time of the survey and reporting to have experienced technology-related changes during the pandemic period. So in total, we had 291 individuals in the sample. And this is a bit how the sample looked like. So we had 62% of women, 38% of men. The average age was 56. About educational level, we had 44% with low, medium educational level, and 56% high educational level, where by high educational level we meant from bachelor degree level up. And 30% of the sample indicated to have some sort of managing responsibilities, which in the survey was formulated as having managing other employees, and 70% of them did not have such responsibilities. Just briefly about the analytical approach that we used. So first of all, we described the changes. So what changes people experienced during the pandemic at work. And then we compared between those people who were satisfied with these changes and those who were not satisfied with these changes. And then we modeled, based on that, we modeled the association between satisfaction with technology-related changes at work and relevant predictors. So as I said, as a first step, we looked into the changes, the experienced changes by individuals. And this is a table showing the list of changes that were reported. Just to clarify the table, so the numbers that you see, respondents could select more than one answer. So this means that the numbers that you see here are not individuals, but it's numbers referring to the answers. So that being said, the most common change that was reported was increase in online meetings, and that was reported by 96% of the individuals. And then there were other significant changes, so that were reported very often also. So writing more emails, using new programs on computers or phones, performing more tasks with digital technologies. There were also least reported changes, and these were mostly using social media for work purposes more than before, or adopted new types of devices or moved their business online. These were the least reported changes in our sample. So then I wanted to show you the model that we constructed. So as I mentioned earlier, we modeled the association between satisfaction with technology-related changes and key relevant predictors. So as you can see here, we identified 4 main factors associated with satisfaction. And these were age, education level, workload changes, and technology-related difficulties. So what we found out was that individuals between 59 years old were more likely to report satisfaction with technology-related changes compared to the older group, so to those aged 60 years and over. For the education level, we saw that higher educational levels increased the likelihood of being satisfied with technology-related changes. Then we saw that those individuals who did not experience changes in workload were significantly more likely to be satisfied with technology-related changes. And also that experiencing difficulties with using technologies reduced the likelihood of satisfaction with technology-related changes. So all in all, what we saw is that satisfaction with technology-related changes during the COVID-19 pandemic was unequally distributed across groups of older workers, and it followed a social gradient. Group of individuals who were in younger age group, more with higher level of education and more digitally skilled, were more likely to report satisfaction with technology-related changes at work during the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we can think here is that these groups were probably more prepared and equipped to deal with these changes during the pandemic, although it was a rapid acceleration, while their counterparts were more likely to experience technology-related changes at work in a negative manner, and then most likely to also suffer from its consequences in the work and private spheres. And then what we can assume here is that it's likely that these groups did not have the appropriate access to job resources, training, and digital resources to be able to adapt to the technology-related changes at work smoothly during the pandemic, as much as the younger, the more educated and digital competent counterparts did. So I listed here a couple of practical implications that I wanted to share with you, and some future research directions about practical implications. So I would say that there is really a urgent need to prepare older workers for ongoing and future unexpected acceleration in digital transformation, like the one that we faced with the pandemic. So in order to make them more resilient to changes, and I call this digital resilience strategies. So really to make them resilient to technology-related changes. And then there is also a need for tailored efforts to ensure more equal access to digital training and upskilling, particularly targeting less educated and less digitally skilled workers. So really focused training interventions. And as for the research directions, so it would be important to explore the consequences of this satisfaction with technology-related changes in late phases of working life. So really trying to understand what does it mean then to be satisfied or to be dissatisfied with these ongoing changes at work. But it would also be important to investigate how satisfaction with digital technology or digital related changes influences other outcomes like job satisfaction, willingness, and ability to prolong working life, and in general well-being. And also it would be interesting to examine how a positive experience with technology-related changes at work can actually be supported among older workers. So this is all from my side. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Arianna, for a great presentation. And my first question is, first of all, if there's any comments or any questions to Arianna directly before we come to Matt's input. I just get congratulations in the chat. But that is
and I thought I could perhaps share the link to our publication, so that to our paper, so that people can take a look if they want to read more details, perhaps.
In between Wenke and there's a hand, right?
Yes. Hello, Arianna. Thanks for the
Wenke.
presentation. Yeah, I have one question and also maybe one comment. And the question is because I missed the introduction part of the variables. So I was wondering, do you also take into account the experiences, especially the previous experiences of technology among your study participants, because that relates to satisfaction, right? And the second one is regarding the future directions, because I can see the potential that your study perhaps only in the employment or the workplace. But I was also wondering there might be other factors, for example, from other life domains like family relations or pension reforms or pension systems, because maybe some people do not because they don't have the capacity or they don't have the resources, but because they do not have the time because they need to take care of someone in their homes, especially for older women. So I wonder, maybe you can also I don't know, like move beyond a bit from the employment perspective, but also looking into other changes or critical conditions in other life domains. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Wenke, for your questions. So I will start with the first common question you had. So no, unfortunately, we couldn't look into previous experiences with technology because we don't have that information from the study. We used technology-related difficulties as a proxy for that somehow. So we kind of assume that if a person was struggling a lot with this change, with these digital related changes during COVID-19 pandemic, then we can assume that she had less experience in the past with technology. But yeah, so that is a proxy information, so it's not exactly what you asked for. So that was not was not available as data. And regarding your second question, or better, a comment perhaps. I think it's a really interesting point, and I agree with you that it will probably be interesting to see how different domains of life somehow interact to make people more ready or equipped to deal with this type of changes in different life domains. So I agree with you. Again, we weren't able to take this into account in this study, but I agree with you that that would be definitely relevant, and we know that like exposure to technology in other domains of life make you more likely to benefit from use of technologies in other domains of life. So I think it's really relevant. You had a very relevant point. Yeah, thank you.
Steve, you have the next hand.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Arianna, for your presentation. It was very interesting. I just wondered, in addition to the breakdowns of managerial responsibilities and levels of education, if there were any other indications that you had about the types of job that people were doing or the sectors that they worked in, and whether or not, if you'd had an opportunity to see if that had made any difference to the responses. And also another interesting, possibly interesting area next time would there's obviously links between satisfaction and productivity, and I wondered if it would also been interesting to see if people had felt that these changes had made them more productive or not. There may have been a certain reluctance to answer that question honestly, but I wondered again if there are any indications of that. Thank you very much, and thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for your questions, Steve. So regarding the types of job or occupation, unfortunately, we didn't have that information. So that is why we couldn't include it. But so we used more the job level, assuming that people in higher job positions were probably most likely to be prepared to do this type of changes compared to other groups. Unfortunately, we didn't have more than that. And about the satisfaction and productivity, I think this is a very good point. We didn't look into that. We have in this, so based on this survey, we have information, for example, on other changes also experienced by the workers. For example, workload changes. So if they experience more changes in workload. So if they worked more or they worked less. We don't have, I think, information on productivity, but perhaps it would be possible to somehow derive it from other indicators, but we didn't look into that. It's an interesting suggestion, though. Thank you.
I have two more questions. One is Peter and with a hand on the screen, and then I have a question in the chat. I don't know which was the sequence of it, but Peter, please start, and then we take the chat input, and then we continue with Matt's input after that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. And two questions. The one is there had been two major changes in people's life, in people's working conditions. The one was Corona, the pandemics. The other had been the technology, the application of technology. Do you have any information, or can you say anything on how was it divided, that you can clearly say this was technological change, this was the general effect of pandemics? And the other point is then concrete technological change. Did you look at participation, or was it just imposed to people, they had to use it? Or was there any possible difference where people could decide which way they would like to implement technological change, which way they want to apply it? There's always a little bit of leeway. So did you look into this?
No, not in that detailed way. So what we asked in the survey was whether the person experienced technology-related changes at work, yes or no, and then they could specify which type of changes they experienced, and that refers to the list that I showed you in the first table. So all those changes, so they could indicate which changes specifically were they dealing with. So I can't really say much more than that. So we don't know how they were introduced to the changes. So that is not something that we know much about, if they were asked to, if they were forced to. So we don't really know about that. Yeah. So but yeah, probably that can play somehow a role with the perceived satisfaction then. But yeah, that is not something that we looked into. What was your first question again? Because I didn't have the time to take note about it.
Yeah, well, it's the two changes. How did they interact? The one was pandemics, the other technological change. So the pandemics as such, the new conditions of life, of working, was a threat to many, where they said, well, maybe that they said technological changes, that's the smaller part, or where they had been overwhelmed and saying, well, we now have to take this, just forget the pandemics.
Yeah, no, that's thank you. That's a good question. So the COVID survey that we conduct, the COVID study that we conducted, so overall looked into social consequences. So we also looked at other changes, not only technology-related changes. So people were indeed experiencing other changes due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and not only, of course, technological related changes. We did in this study, we didn't look at the interaction between other changes brought by the COVID-19 pandemic and the technology related ones. So yeah, so the outcome that we used was really satisfaction with technology related changes during that period. And of course, there was a specification that we wanted to focus on changes experienced during that period of time. But yeah, that is all I can say, I think.
Thank you.
But I think it's a good hint that we have to connect the whole range of changes that we have to the technological changes. I think the combination is essential. But we can take this later. I wanted to originally just want to have the question in the chat, and now I have two more hands. I'm a little bit afraid that Matt doesn't find the time to present. Sarah and Marita, can these questions wait until we have Matt's presentation, because then we have some time left?
Yes, I can wait. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Because there was one question, but I would also take this from Jana at the end, because there's more and more questions coming in. I really enjoy that there is interest in discussion, but I think Matt, it would be great if you can start, and then we take all the other questions afterwards. I think you will also enrich the discussion, of course, and then we have a more broader basis.
And it'll give people a good excuse to stay till the very end as well, because they can get their questions in. Now I'm going to show my adeptness or lack of adeptness with new technology by seeing if I can get the presentation slides on. I have so much experience with Teams and not as much with Zoom. Let's see here. Can you see the slides?
Yes, but it's still not in presentation mode. It's not PowerPoint. Now it's perfect. Yep.
Now it's working. Wonderful. Yep. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Andreas and Gulin for inviting me to the session today, and to Arianna for quite an interesting discussion. I hope that my presentation will be complementary to Arianna's, and we'll focus a little bit on some of the policy implications of the research, and drawing back to Arianna's conclusion about some of the practical implications as well as future direction. Say a little bit about myself. I'm a professor of work and employment here at the University of Leicester. I've done research in the UK for about 20 years now on aging workforces, focused particularly on human resource management policies. So what are organizations doing to prepare for aging demographics in the context of all of the other changes in the world and the economy, like the advancement of digitalization and AI. I'm also a working group lead for a cost action program called DigiNet, which is looking at digitalization and the impact that it has on age inequalities. We've got a couple of working groups. Mine is focused, or the group that I'm a part of, is focused on employer responses to digitalization and age inequalities. We're working on a scoping review on the subject, and we've done a couple of country reports giving a snapshot of what businesses are doing across Europe. These are my contact details, so I'd encourage you to, even if it's just to send an email to say hello, at least we'll have contact with one another, and that's my website on some previous research that I've done. We also, I should mention as well, DigiNet, we run a seminar series as well. It's periodic, but it's also online, and I'd invite everybody to join us there as well. I saw a couple of DigiNet alumni in the call here today, and hopefully maybe even Arianna, if she'd be willing to present to a different audience. Hopefully we can start a wider community between our two research networks. So my remit is looking at the policy implications of digitalization, especially focused on some of the things that Arianna showed in her paper. And in order to encourage a discussion with the wider group, I thought, we all pretty much agree that interventions are needed in order to ensure that older people have access to and are able to embrace the benefits of digitalization, and there aren't people who are going to be left behind. But what do interventions mean? And I can think of three ways that it might be important in a workplace context. One is raising everybody up at least to a certain standard, making sure that everybody has at least foundation digital skills in order to use the technology which is available right now, and use the technology which might be necessary when it comes to work. So there might be, as Arianna says, there's a wide range of skills that older people might have, proficiency in using digital technology, and acceptance of that technology, and it's very much related to socio-demographic factors like education and wealth and income and so forth. And we don't want to see people who are at the sharper end of the job market being left behind. But there's also the question of how older workers might be able to embrace technology and might be able to embrace the latest technology, so that they're not just at level of what they otherwise would be, but they're going to be able to benefit from the new technology. And then there's the third issue of what happens to people who are then displaced by new technology, by digitalization. If digitalization leads to some people, especially people who are in old sectors or older sectors, being pushed out of the job market, what are we doing to prepare them so that they can make a change in careers, so that they can stay economically active up until pension age? So when it comes to the first question on foundational skills, you could argue that this might not be the main remit for employers, or employers might have a stakehold in ensuring that everybody has foundational skills. But really, this is something that government should take a lead on. One, because there are going to be a lot of people who don't have the skills to use digital technology, but also don't have the kind of work which would enable them to access the training that they might need in order to get those skills. So if you're working for a small organization, if you're self-employed, if you're out of work, if you've been displaced and you're trying to get back into work, employer support isn't really going to do you very much good. And we can say all that we can talk to the hills about what employers should be doing, but it doesn't really resonate for those groups. And it might be a mix of employer interventions, government interventions, communities, and so forth, which are needed to keep people economically active. I've done some work with a community group representing Chinese migrants in the UK. A lot of them are self-employed, and they've relied on one another to stay economically active as the doors were slammed on them when they first came to the UK, when they were looking for jobs. Maybe community organizations play a very big role in this as well. The other reason why it might be more of a mix of provision is, and I think Wenxian made this point very well, is that a lot of the benefits which come from digitalization, while they might be important in a work context, they're also important outside of work as well. My dad, he's 87 years old. He's in the United States. He lives by himself. He's very independent, very healthy, and so forth, but he's worried about falling. And he's worried that he might not stay independent, might not be able to stay in his own home as long as he wants to if he has a fall. Technology has an answer for that. I got him a smartwatch. I had to get one for myself so I could train him up on this, which has a hard fall detection system. And I know that it works because I lost a document a couple of days ago, and as I lost it, I slammed my fist on the desk, and then suddenly it asked me, do I want an ambulance? I had to say no, but at least I know it works. That technology is important. It is a win for the older person, for my dad's win for his family. It's a win for the public at large because it keeps him independent longer than he would have otherwise. In our country reports, we found a number of examples of government providing that kind of support. In Sweden, you might you'll no doubt be much more knowledgeable about the SWAGE program, a holistic approach to aging in the workplace, and interventions from different groups in that. Here in the UK, government provides essential digital skills to make sure that everybody's up to at least a certain level so that they can write an email, they can use a bank machine, they can complete an application online, because the benefits of that are spread widely. You have the issue of empowering older workers to use new technology to improve their productivity. And here, you would think that employers should probably take more of a hands-on role with this, to put a little bit more skin in the game, because with older workers better able to use new technology, it improves their productivity. It makes them it accrues benefit both for the individual worker and for the organization. Of course, when it comes to new technology, we don't really know what training people are going to need in the future because technology is changing. You know, the term VUCA, it's a volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous world we're facing. In some ways, this could benefit older workers because it tends to be that what older workers are looking for when it comes to training are not very long programs, which might be very resource intensive, might take somebody off of the out of the office for a long period of time, but shorter training, which is more top-up training, so that they can build on the experience and knowledge that they have. But it's not just about training; it's also addressing ageist assumptions. You know, we've heard the term digital native, which usually is associated with younger people versus digital immigrants. The assumption being that older people are only going to use digital technology if they're dragged kicking and screaming towards it. Might be true for some older workers, might be true for some younger workers as well, but we can't really base our policies and practices on such assumptions. As part of the scoping review, we found a paper which was discussing the use of chatbots in building intergenerational teams. So we know that intergenerational teams tend to be more productive and more creative than teams which are only made up of younger people or teams that are only made up of older people. The two latter groups, they can start things quicker. They can get an understanding of one another quicker, and they can, start a task much more easily. But an intergenerational team gets the best of both worlds. They get the experience of the older workers. They get they get the technological knowledge that younger people might have, and they can benefit from the wide variety of lived experience that everybody has. The problem is that it might take a long time for an intergenerational team to meld together and to have a shared understanding of what the team is for and a plan for going forward. Well, this paper suggested that actually chatbots can help with that as long as they're designed to meet the needs of everybody in the group. And in fact, one way in which chatbots can help the older worker in particular is that it gives them kind of like a mask. It's kind of, I don't know if you in Sweden have had the show, the Masked Entertainer or the Masked Singer, where you have somebody who's singing and they're wearing a costume, and the costume is meant to sort of hide their identity, so you can judge their abilities based on their singing abilities. Well, a chatbox in this case might act in pretty much the same way. An older person isn't seen as an older person in the team. They're seen as a chatbot just like everybody else, and then they can put their position forward, and it's a guard against ageist assumptions that they might face. Can also use AI technology in ways that people hadn't thought of. I was just at a conference 2 days ago, and there was this really interesting idea that was put forward that I hadn't really thought of before, in which somebody suggested that if you are, as an academic, if you're writing papers and you want to improve your success rate, sometimes you send a paper in and it gets published. Sometimes you get a rejection. Sometimes you get a desk rejection or whatever else. And they suggested, well, what you could do is you could take all of the reviews that you've ever got, put them all together on a single document and put them into ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, what are the things that people consistently say I'm doing well? What are the things that I'm not doing so well at? And it gives you some good feedback that way. You could also use ChatGPT to help you with documents like presentations like this. Although I'd be very cautious with this because I use ChatGPT to put together these presentation slides. I just sort of spoke for a little while, put it onto a document, put it in. One of the things that I said was what I have here. These slides were created with the help of ChatGPT. Then ChatGPT changed that to these slides were produced by ChatGPT. So be a little bit cautious about that. ChatGPT tends to be a little bit of a credit hog, I have to say, at least in this the 4.0 version. You have the issue of displaced workers. And it's important to remember that a lot of people in the future are going to be displaced by AI. And training on use of technology isn't really going to help them very much if their job is gone. So in the UK, there was a study that was done by an organization called the IPPR, which suggested about 44% of jobs over the next decade are going to be disrupted by AI. Some are going to be eliminated entirely. Some are going to change significantly. So you need to have those digital skills in order to continue in the job. What support is available for them? You can't really rely on the employer too much because if you're the employer that's getting rid of the older workers, you might not have an incentive to provide the support in order to transition somewhere else. Not universally the case. You have a lot of organizations that are providing a lot of support to people who are displaced, but you have to have a holistic response to this. In the UK, we piloted something called the Midlife Career Review, which was about giving older people 50 plus, the chance to go to a career advisor. But I think a much better model for this, well, two very good models for this. One, in Singapore, you have something called Skills Future, which has training which is specifically targeted to midlife career changers. So these are programs in which people can top up their skills rather than start from ground zero. And then two, here in the UK and probably in many countries, you have quite a good infrastructure in place to support people who leave the armed forces in transitioning to a job which matches the skills that they have. A part of the reason for that is doing good for people who have served their country, but a bigger part of this is making very good use of the skills which are in the workforce, in the job market, so you're not, the country as a whole isn't losing those skills and those talents. So you've got the roadmap in place. The question is, how do you then extend it to other people who might be displaced in work as well? Last thing that I'll mention is trade union involvement. During COVID, I did a piece of work with some colleagues at the Center for Research and Employment and Work on the role of health and safety representatives in managing the transition to new working practices as a result of COVID. For some, the people who were in frontline services, people who were in retail and so forth, it was all about the protective equipment and making sure it was available for people so that they could still go into the workplace, but that they were safe in doing so. For some, it was transitioning from working in an office to working at home. And what we found was that health and safety reps, who are employee representatives who are meant to have a dialogue and meant to be consulted by their employer on changes in the workplace, played quite a good, constructive partnership type role with organizations to make sure that, one, employees were aware of the changes that were in place, two, that they had a voice in how those changes were being carried out, and three, that they continued to be safe in the workplace. So we had an example of somebody who got who was transitioned from an office-based work to home working. They got the equipment from their employer. They got the laptop, the desk, the keyboards, and so forth. But they did a little bit of what you might call garage engineering, electrician work, and sort of tried to do things that the employer didn't want them to do in terms of the electrical units, and almost caused a fire in their house. Well, it was the health and safety rep that was able to identify this and to make sure that how the employer said that the equipment was used was going to be used in people's workplaces. And I think in a wider context, when we think of the health and safety implications of digitalization in terms of physical health, making sure that people have the right workstations if they're doing some of their work from home, and mental health, if people are working more remotely, that it doesn't affect their mental health. Trade union and health and safety reps in particular can play quite an important role in that regard. The last thing I'll say about this is, not surprisingly, AI has a very big effect, will have a very big effect on all older workers. For some, it will be the employer who takes the lead in ensuring that people are able to embrace that change. And for others, it might be a mix of support from employers, from government, and from third sector organizations. So thank you very much. I hope that was I hope that was complimentary with an aid to Arianna's excellent presentation.
Thanks, Matt. And I have to switch on my microphone, of course. And for an excellent presentation, it was really, really instructive, and also added a lot, and probably also adds a lot to the discussion needs that we have in the group. And how is it? I can't see much of you. Can you stop sharing for a second, and then it's easier.
Yep. Let's see. There we go. And no, wait. Is it off or is it still on? Oh wait, my screen. There we go. If I turn that off.
Oh, well, there.
Perfect.
Yeah, because you're of course you opened the discussion also to the beyond the environment and beyond the perspective on the employees, in particular the connection to the environment and also to the employers is extremely instructive here. And Arianna, maybe you can simply react on this.
So we have few questions on the chat from before. So how do we want to take? Shall I take the questions first, or you want me to?
Maybe first take the opportunity simply to connect to Mats.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, I think it was well, yes, it was complementary, I think, and it complemented very well what we presented with our study. I liked the more applied inputs that you shared, and also like you broadened a little bit the insights, and you gave more broader insights, also including the reference to the adaptability, to the need to increase adaptability of older workers, so not simply focusing on digital related resources, but also on other aspects which can in turn support and support like a sort of digital resilience of older workers. And as Andreas said, you brought the employer's perspective, that is of course key here. So in addition to what we observed in the study, yeah. So I think we can probably open the floor to questions so that we can elaborate more on these aspects.
Yep, please. And I still have Sarah and Merita on my list from before months. And Sarah, I see you in the screen. Merita is maybe asking you, can you connect to this? And does it help to have Mats' presentation in between for your question?
Actually, yes. I mean, I do think that the presentations were very complementary. Aside from perhaps looking at some point at remote work as an independent variable in the first study, I'd like to know whether there's anything really unique about the pandemic that's relevant to that study. It seems to me that we are looking at research that has broader and more troubling consequences, or leads to more troubling interpretations than just something that happened during a very special and unique period of time. Namely, that older workers have always ended up or been like this as they were in the first study. I think if we looked back to when desktop computers were introduced on a wide scale into offices, or when the auto industry shifted to more digital work, we would find very similar we would have had very similar findings about older workers. And perhaps I'm wrong, but I don't really see that the pandemic is particularly important for that first study. And I'd like to see more of a focus when the authors go out to discuss the findings of what they may mean in terms of our broader, greater response to what employers, governments, and others should be doing to overcome a problem that I've been dealing with for almost 50 years. This leads to the second presentation, which I thought also, they were both very, very fine presentations. And I would like to ask Matt, why is it that we're where we are right now? Why haven't we moved further along in terms of responses on the part of the players to the role of older workers in the workplace. I don't see that we've made particularly a great progress, and that older workers are still struggling to cope with the introduction of new technologies. And as that second presentation showed, demonstrated so eloquently, AI is the new thing that we need to be worried about now. So thank both of you for very good presentations that I think, certainly in the case of the first presentation, extend far beyond what the author might think she was dealing with. And I appreciate having the more practical perspective in the second presentation.
That goes to the two of you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I can briefly react on Sarah's comment. Thank you very much. And I fully agree with you that what we found probably goes beyond, most likely goes beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that conducting the study during that period of time made it quite interesting, because we really, at that time, people were really facing a rapid acceleration of technology-related changes at work, much more than right before the pandemic. And I think those changes also stayed. So we didn't really go back to the previous technology settings. So we kept all these online meetings and all this massive use of digital tools at work. So I think what made the COVID-19 pandemic period special is really that it brought an acceleration of a phenomenon that was indeed already happening, and so we would have probably found a very similar results without the COVID-19 pandemic. So I agree with you.
Thank you.
And I remember when I first started my work in this field, it was around the time of the 2008, 2009 market crash and the recession that came from it. And there were very big, as Sarah says, there were very big differences on how older workers responded to it, and two, how employers responded to it. Here in the UK, and probably in the United States as well, for at least a certain segment of the older population, their participation rate, while everybody else's labor participation rate was going straight down, there were some groups of older workers where it was actually going up. Here in the UK, it was the 65 plus group. Part of the reason for it was they just introduced regulations prohibiting age discrimination. They were in the process of abolishing mandatory retirement entirely. But probably a bigger reason for that was organizations wanted to keep the known quantity in their workplace. So if they had somebody who was, say, 65 years old and they'd expected to retire that year, and they saw their pension was just going in the toilet, and they said, listen, can I stay on for a year or two extra? Usually the employer said yes, because it was a cheaper option for them than hiring somebody new, having to train them, and probably having them for a long time. So having that known quantity helped the organization in that transition period. What happened during COVID, of course, was in many respects the great retirement. A lot of older workers leaving work earlier than they expected to. One, because they might have a health issue themselves, and they think, well, it's really not worth it to put my own health in jeopardy. Two, they might not have very much when it comes to organizational support to help them manage through this period in which they're trying to stay economically active, but still are worried as well about the impact that it's going to have on health. And there, having a health and safety rep in the workplace played a quite crucial role in some organizations, especially in the healthcare sector, because it helped address some of the health issues that older workers and workers generally we're concerned about and trying to find some practical solutions around that rather than people leaving work. And then 3, you have a lot of older workers who left work early because they thought, not correctly, but they still thought that if they left work, then they make it less likely that a younger worker might be pushed out of work. Now, of course, what you're saying is a great unretirement and people trying to get back into the job market. And it's much more difficult for somebody to get back into work after they've been out than to stay a little bit longer. To Sarah's question about whether, why haven't things changed as quickly as possible? I mean, certainly in liberal market economies like the United States and the UK, employers are always looking for the business case for doing something. It's and I've seen many examples of older people who have very good skills who are trying to get into work, and it's very difficult for them to pitch those skills. For somebody who's in work, the employer can see the value. They can see what they bring to the organization. But for somebody who's been pushed out of work to get back in, although there's a lot of rhetoric about using the skills across the life course, if you're an unknown quantity for the organization, it tends to be the organization is going to try to find reasons not to employ you rather than to employ you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a difficult issue, this whole business of what employers really want. And I think much of our research has focused, because they're easier to reach, on the employee. And they tend to be participants in large-scale surveys, for example. You can get at them. Employers, at least in the United States, tend to be more suspicious, less reluctant, too busy to participate in the types of research that we need. But I don't think we really have a good grip on what employers really want and really believe. And I don't think they're entirely honest in telling us, in the face of age discrimination laws, for example, what they might really think about older workers. So we've still got barriers to overcome. Thank you for your response and your presentation.
And Marita is also addressing also the similar thing, the issue of the self-employed. So if there is no employer in the room, what happens there? And that was a question, I think, to Matt, and then it's I have Steve and Wenxian in that sequence.
Yeah.
Marita, want to explain, or did I summarize correctly?
Yes, thank you, Matt, who invited me to participate in these very much interesting lectures. I am also member of COST DigiNet, and I was listening with very much interest both presentation. I am from the University of Tirana, and in Albania, self-employed people represent almost 70% or more of the labor market force. So in this meaning, their share in the labor forces are too high compared to other groups. And I like the presentation of Arianna, and I want to know if it is the same representation of this self-employed group in your region, that you take it as an example in your sample. And the other question is, because of that situation, Matt mentioned that the Chinese in the UK have had their support from the community. They supporting each other. The same is happening also in Albania. But I wonder if the employees have their organization as trade unions. Do the self-employed group in your countries have any kind of organization as an interested group to protect their rights?
It's a great point that in terms of a social phenomena and the support that's needed for a certain group of worker that might be affected by it. So in this case, the effect of digitalization on older people and older workers, it needs to be delivered through a patchwork of organizations that are able to reach them. It's why focusing on employers play a very important role with this, and there's an interest for organizations to keep their older workers productive in work, but two, also to be able to source talent from a very wide pool. So the point that Sarah was making about the difficulties in engaging with employers that are facing very big labor and skill shortages tend to be willing to engage because they want to try anything in order to address the skills gap that they have. But for others, it will be different groups. And the point that I had with the Chinese group is that for many migrants, they relied on their own community to support them when nobody else would. So if you want to reach them at an older age, not just when it comes to work, but when it comes to care, when it comes to healthy aging, and so forth, the channel to go through is the community group. You're not going to get much of a response from a big government program, but if the community has an active role, then that would be, that's the linchpin for this. And the same might be true for self-employed groups as well. A while back, I did some research on small organizations, and it's amazing the myriad of organizations that support a small company, micro company, a small organization in addressing HR challenges. So you might have an HR person, but that HR person only spends about 2 hours a week on HR issues, and usually it's just signing a paycheck for staff, for counting up the number of days leave that they have. But they also rely on professional bodies, the Federation of Small Businesses, HR specialist organizations seem to play a very big role in this, and surprisingly, lawyers, solicitors. I just had a member of staff that dropped a sack of potatoes on their foot. Can I be sued for that? Yes or no? And if you want to change practices of organizations, you might have to go through these myriad of organizations in order to deliver it. So for self-employed organizations who play kind of a dual role there, one, they play the employer, so they need to provide the support to their members of staff to make sure that they have the skills to use digitalization, but they're also older. They might also be older people themselves, and getting that support through these different associations, professional bodies, professional organizations, and so forth might be the way in which to get the support that they need, both so that they can actively age on their own, but also they can support their members of staff in doing so.
I have thank you, Matt. First of all, I have Steve and Venkan still on my list. I tend to call this the last hands I can accept. If there's something urgent, just don't be shy, raise your hands. We try to get this in. Steve.
Thank you, Andreas, and thank you too, Matt, for your presentation there. There are a couple of things I would like to take your mind on. First of all, you talked about need for foundational digital skills, and that's really the role of the state. However, with older workers, most of them are well beyond the opportunity they're well outside the scope of the education and training system, the traditional education and training system. This applies for older workers who are wanting to come back into the labour market. And it seems to me that there is a large gap between certain training schemes that may be provided by government and what employers say that it is that they need. And I wondered whether or not there is also a larger role for employers to play in these foundational skills, developing these foundational skills, particularly for older workers. Developing on from that, the next question I wanted to ask you is, what do you see as the mindset of employers in this concept? you talked about the business case that employers put forward, and Sarah talked about what it is that employers really want. From the research that I've done, I'm extremely skeptical that employers know what they want. I'm very skeptical about the whole idea of the skill shortage narrative. Employers really focus on a particular specific demand, a particular person for their job, not necessarily to recruit someone on the basis of their potential and their ability and a certain willingness to invest in them to provide them the training to perform a task. And with the increasing digitalization use of technology, is the mindset one whereby technology is to replace people, a substitute, or is it seen as a complement, as a complement to people? Because this idea, this mindset, I think is part of the reason why, as Sarah said, that we've had this problem with older workers. There is a particular view, there is a particular narrative that exists. Older workers, you can't train them, or they cost too much, or whatever. And I'm wondering whether there is, if you agree with that. If you do, is there scope for changing this mindset? Is there scope for building a greater partnership between the public and private sector, and employers taking on a greater responsibility for providing foundational and other digital skills for the workforce in a similar way to which we used to do with apprenticeships just for young people, but now do we need to extend it to include older people in the light of demographic change? Now, that's a lot, and I may not have been necessarily clear, but do the best you can. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I think you make an excellent point there. One is on the issue of, so to speak, partnership between government, business, and representative of employees like trade unions, in order to shape training and other support which matches the needs of not just the needs of the older person, but also the organization and other stakeholders. Could be outside of the work context as well, that people get relevant skills, rather than a bog standard. Here's how you open an email. The foundational skills that are provided through the Essential Digital Framework in the UK is very, very basic, and it probably wouldn't help somebody's employment prospects terribly much. In terms of engaging employers on the issue, I think there's a very big difference between how they see older workers generally and how they see their own older workers. There was recently a survey that was done for the Center for Aging Better here in the UK, and a majority of people, some of them managers, some of them employers as well, we're still holding on to very ageist assumptions about older workers needing to make way for younger workers, older workers not being able to adapt to new digital skills and so forth. And it was a very grim picture, especially for somebody who's been working in the area for such a long time. But when somebody talks about their own employees, they might not see them as an older person. They might see them as somebody who can deliver something which is absolutely important to the organization. They might have an important skill. They might have some tacit knowledge, which the employer is keen to keep. How to engage employers is quite a difficult question, and I'm grappling with this question right now in relation to veterans, where it's a similar issue. You talk about veterans generally with employers, and they'll be very, very positive about them. They recognize the fact that veterans have, it's said in the UK that the armed forces is the best skilled workforce in the UK. But then when it comes to that very difficult question of how do you transfer a military skill to a civilian organization, they're not willing to make that bridge, and they're not willing to say, okay, yeah, that skill I can see can be used for that particular job. Takes a little bit of work. You've got some organizations that are best practice organizations, and they can say, here are the benefits of this. Here's why we've initiated this program for either supporting our older workers and staying up until retirement, or veterans, or here's how we're sourcing talent from this group we hadn't thought of before. Here are the reasons behind it. Here are the benefits, and so forth. But other organizations aren't going to respond unless they've got the same issue that they're facing, and they can see how they can relatively easily change their practices. I should say, however, that this is very much in a UK context, and the situation might be very different in Sweden and in other coordinated market economies in which there is that social dialogue there. I know in Germany, for example, you've got there are collective agreements in certain sectors on looking at the age demographic profile of the sector, recognize that all employers have a skin in the game to address this, and having a more coordinated approach to that. So if in the manufacturing sector, there's a recognition that we just don't have enough young people in order to sustain the sector for the next 10 years, maybe there's a collective agreement which says, okay, we're going to invest in a certain amount of training, some ergonomic changes in the workplace, and other changes, and we'll invest in that as a sector, but you don't really have that here in the UK.
You address in the essential issue, which is a comparative perspective, or the difference between our systems that we're embedded in. Of course, and this is of course that would be a seminar series on its own to address this. No, because it has severe implications explicitly for what you discussed. And but yeah, well, we have to put this a little bit to the side probably and give Wenke the opportunity to have the last or to open the last round of questions.
Thank you, Andres. And also thank you, Matt, for the presentation. I really like the interventionist perspective, and also particularly the third one regarding the AI and the effects of automation in the labor market. Because I'm originally from China, so my perspective would be from China. It's very high-tech society in China. I wonder what might be your perspective on the role of the state regarding how to tackle the effects of AI automation. Because, for example, in China, we have this potential large-scale job displacement because of automation and AI stuff. And most of people nowadays, particularly those vulnerable groups, would do some labor work, like physical intensive work, like taxi drivers or food delivery man, or some other similar occupations. But then there are also the effects of automation of this wave of digitalization is to kill a lot of occupations in the Chinese labor market. But then the problem would be it seems like they do not really produce a lot of new occupations during this digitalization wave. So I was wondering, simply from a supply and demand perspective in the labor market, so if we have less or decreasing occupations, but we have new occupations created in the labor market, and this seems to be more a systematic problem or issue that should be tackled by the state. And then I was wondering, what is your perspective on the role of the state in tackling those issues?
That's a great question. I've done quite a bit of work from a comparative perspective. I haven't had a chance to do work in China. I've done work in Hong Kong on this issue, and looking at what countries seem to be doing well and what could be models for other countries. So usually when we're talking about it from an international level, often Japan is cited as the gold standard when it comes to aging workforces. I'm much more skeptical about this because, one, you've got a lot of people, if you're in, I think it's called the Shujin Shuku type of job, a lifetime employment job, then you're pretty secure when it comes to work in later life. As I understand, you reach a retirement age. Retirement age was 60, it's now 65. your contract of employment ends, but you're offered a new contract of employment, in which your skills can be used for something else. So it might be a part-time job, lower paid, but you can top up your income with your pension. Sounds wonderful if you're in that kind of job, but about 40% of the workforce are what's called atypical workers, and they're outside of that. Plus, there's a problem of crowding out. We talk about the lump of labor fallacy. It's something quite real in Japan. So you've got a whole lost generation of young people who haven't been able to get into that more secure work because you've got older workers who are displacing them. Wouldn't be the case here in the UK, wouldn't be in the United States, but that very high level of job security doesn't work very well. The reason I mentioned Singapore is that it's quite an interesting model in which the government acts as, or the state acts as, a facilitator for older workers. It's very individualistic, and you could say, well, there's some negative sides to that, and there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be left behind because of that, because some people are able to manage their careers very well. I think about my dad. My dad had about a dozen jobs over his life in America, but he was able to transition from one job to another fairly easily. And when he was 65, he was able to change to a new job, a part-time job, because he had all that lifetime experience before. The Singapore model can work very well for somebody like him, because if you need that top-up training and you need to go from one sector to another, then you might be able to manage that a little bit better, because the government says, okay, well, here's the training that you might need to have, a 6-week course in order to change careers. That might work very well. Also works in a context in which you've got a mid-career job market to move about. The other thing I mentioned, the Veterans Network, the reason that I like that is, and just going back to the discussion that we had with Steve, is that it is a partnership between government, businesses, veterans charities, and other organizations who all have some skin in the game, who want to make sure that veterans are able to transition not just to a job, but to a job which matches their skills. But employers have some input for that as well. And the research that I did before, an employer gave a very good example of this, where they said, the problem that I have when veterans come to who apply for a job is that I say, well, what skills do you have which could benefit me? And they say, I've got great leadership skills. And they say, that's good, but a lot of people in my company have leadership skills. We've got a lot of leaders here. How do you focus it on my particular business? So that messaging, it's a very small example, but that messaging has changed for veterans because of the input from the infrastructure in place through training, through career transition partnership, training which matches what organizations need, and helping them make that bridge to a job in the civilian world, which is equivalent to what they did in the military. And I think that if it works for veterans, why can't it work for other people who deliver public services who are also going to be displaced for various reasons, including digitalization? And if it works for them, why can't it work for other older workers? It's got all of the ingredients. It's got government investment. It's got employer input into the practices, and it's something in which somebody who's making a midlife career transition, who right now doesn't have very much support, can get that support from that mechanism. And I think that's something that, it's something to sort of add to the mix of how to support people, not just older people generally, in the context of changing technology and the impact that it has on the job market.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think we reached some level of saturation. Not really. We could continue, but we also lose the audience now. So we're a little bit behind time by this. I hope that we find another way to continue this discussion. Maybe also contrasting this also with further insights and more discussion contributions. Maybe there's an opportunity, Arianna, to also connect to DigiNet and to continue in that context. And I look forward to continuing this discussion in any way. We will have a next webinar on May 27, I think, Gülin, and you maybe can simply briefly advertise, even if the audience is shrinking. But it's a different topic. It's not about digitalization anymore, but it's of course about late working life and older workers, but more with the health focus, with the public health focus in that case. Gülin.
Yes, we have a next webinar in 22nd May, and we will send around the announcement again with the participants. And in this webinar, Daniel Farkseth will come from Karolinska University talking on healthy working life. But we will send out the details in upcoming days.
You will nearly be unable to avoid this, so we'll send it by email, and you get this invitation immediately. Okay, thank you very much for today. In particular, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Arianna, for this. And I really appreciate that you spent your time, invested this year, and thanks also for all the contributions to the discussion. I'm very thankful for that. And I look forward to meeting again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.